President of Carroll Engineering and the Chairman of the Board of the Central Bucks Chamber of Commerce.
Thank you, Scott. I'll be brief because you would much rather hear these gentlemen speak than me. But,
No, come on, 10 minutes on engineering.
We are delighted to sponsor the seminar and tour. I think we're up to 10 or 12 years now in a row that we've done it. See a lot of familiar faces. We appreciate repeat customers. And I can't wait to hear from our distinguished panel. So
Great, thank you very much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thank our other sponsors, and then I'm going to introduce Larry to come up and have some opening remarks, because I know you got like 1,000 places to be here, be tonight, right? All right. So I want to thank our supporting sponsors. I want to thank Harleysville Bank. Thank you very much. Especially want to thank Phillips and Donovan Architects. AB8 Waste, they are owned by one of our previous chairs of our committee, so we thank her. If anyone is enjoying wine, you're going to want to put your hands together for J.G. Petrucci. Rosalind Petrucci donated the wine for this evening's event. I don't know why, Brad, but Rosalind always gets the biggest round of applause. I also want to thank Mandy Baker with Whispering Studios. She produced our amazing collectible tile this year for the seminar and the tour. It's only $30, but with a tour ticket, it's $25. Look at that, look at that. We got fancy pricing this year. All right. And then Cindy Hall and the New Hope Historical Society for their warm welcome to New Hope and their enthusiastic help and support of our tour. The New Hope Eagle Fire Company, without whom we would have nowhere to park on Sunday. The American Legion for allowing us to use their facility tonight. Wegmans for the food, and our photographer tonight, Amy McDermott. And because if you're on the tour on Sunday, you're going to want to thank River House at Odette's River House, because they're the ones who are going to be driving you, or you have a really, really long walk. So put your hands together for all these folks. All right, Larry Keller, give us your opening remarks. Tell us why we're here to hear. Tell us what's great about New Hope and why people should re-elect you. No. You got a little while.
I'm not worried about re-election. I've got 24 years in, and I've got one term left. I'm 28 years done. But,
that's what Brady said.
I mean, basically, I want to welcome. I was asked to welcome everyone, and I guess very quickly I'm in awe because we have a very good historian here, and we also have a very good builder and a very good architect. So I may say a few things that might be questioned, but I'll defend them. Basically, for those of you who aren't aware of it, we're an early 18th century town. After Willie Penn and the Heath family, which still exists in Bucks County and Lambertville around here. But the trick with New Hope and why it's so colorful and why I'm very proud to be the mayor is that we offer so much to everybody, and we have different segments of our town, and then you talk about architecture. We have all the architects here, and it's a very fine line when you look at houses that we have from 1735 or 40, Roy, and even my house, the front of my house is 1760, because I found a date in there marking after we stripped the paint out of my paneling. So. The trick is when you get a tourist town like this, and in the middle of the 19th century, we were the center of the Industrial Revolution. In Bucks County was New Hope, and then you get to the end of the 19th century and into early 20th century, we became an art colony, as all of you know. All you do is go to the Michener and see what happened there. Then you fast forward. Obviously, we had the canal, but then the canal's good to walk and see, but then once that was done, then the Playhouse really took us to a totally different level. We were still artistic with the painters, but then we came into theater, and that then made us sort of the epicenter of Bucks County with a real theater, and it's just a draw that everybody comes to, and we now are back for 10 years now. It opened 10 years ago, and we're doing pretty well. You move forward, I'm trying to not talk too long, but you move forward, and the trick is, especially for me, I've been in New Hope for 53 years. And I started here as a young boy working for my mentor, whom some of you know, passed in '69, but I started in '69, he passed in '94, but I've seen a lot of changes, and I knew a lot of the players from the '70s and '80s through my mentor, so it was really marvelous for me to see and know a lot of these people that made New Hope what it is. And a lot of people will come in, they'll either see maybe Stella's and Ralph. That's not a shot. I just want to say Stella's, or most recently, if you look at the changes to the Logan Inn, and on the north side they added to it and built out their dining room and added 24 rooms. And then the River House came in and they added 38 or so rooms. And everybody says, my God, Mayor, how can you take it? And you know, if you just sit idle as a town and just say, we wanted to stay pat, well, pat doesn't work. It's constantly evolving and constantly changing, and some people can't accept that, and some people can, but the reality is that's the world we're in now. And certainly in the last 5 to 8 years, maybe 10 even, we've had some changes, and a couple cottages on North Main Street, lovely, charming, 1925 little summer house cottages that used to come out of the city and stay there. Were torn down, and bigger houses were built, and some very, very well done. And for some of you, I'm sure this panel knows, but on the east side, on the riverside, once you go through the traffic light at Bridge Street, they call that the Gold Coast on the right, and the left side they call the Silver Coast. But it's not so bad if you're living on the Silver Coast side. And it's actually, I'm very happy to say, it's not so bad to live in New Hope, because if you're downtown, which I'm fortunate, I'm right by the railroad station and on Ferry Street, and it's charming. And it's, I feel, and I've done it, it's a responsibility as a resident of this town, if you have an earlier home, is to respect it and to take care of it. And whether you're going to change the siding, you know, when I hear that V word, which I call vinyl, that's not an option. Anybody says, well, it's less expensive. Dude, you shouldn't have moved to New Hope. You're going to not respect the house that you were in, and you want to put up vinyl. It's just, for me, unacceptable. Or the windows they want to do, and I'm sure you architects, you know, some people want to have a 6/6 or 12/12, and they want to have snap-on mullions. Are you kidding? Come on, you're in the wrong. You shouldn't be here, and you shouldn't be in that house. So I think that for the most part, we've tried to be respectful of the houses, and some are more challenging. We have one now with Centra, which is the big Andalusian style house that's across from the high school, and there's questions whether the is it argillite? He said the argillite is deteriorating the basement and it's deteriorating the structure, so you'll see that there are boards trying to hold the walls up, and it's a very respected architect that wants to take that down and rebuild it exactly as it is, and it's divided the town. Some are for it and some are against it. For me, my nightmare was, which I announced at the council meeting, I said, my God, same guy that built that house built my other federal house on Ferry Street the year after in 1823, and I think Centra they did in 1822, so I said, Jesus, I hope my house holds up. So far it's pretty good, it's working fine. So saying all that, I just think that that's constantly what we battle, is you have to be willing to accept and adapt. And a perfect example, past the traffic light, well, I could go, Ralph has done so many changes here. If you look at the Ferry Market, it used to be I think it was a car dealership, and it was a lot of things, but it just has connected all of our downtown area. And thank God for the 5 people that saved the Perry Mansion. And the Perry Mansion's intact, and it's absolutely fabulous. And within a couple of years, had it not had this group of people that said, we need to preserve this building, they did, and it's a blessing, because it would be a shop. It certainly wouldn't be a private home, and they're the little things that make a difference. So we keep pushing forward and trying to do the best we can, but it's really difficult for the challenge for the council members. There are times that some houses can make changes without needing zoning variances, or sometimes they want a special exception. And if we deem that it has merit to make a special exception, we'll do that. But, you know, every bridge is different that you cross, and we do the best we can. And I love our town. I'm happy to be the mayor, and I'll be in for about 5 more minutes, and then I have to talk to a couple I'm marrying in November, and I have to meet with them to go over the wedding ceremony, and then have a birthday party, and then another meeting. So, welcome and enjoy this.
All right, let me introduce our panelists in alphabetical order. Peter Edwardson with Edwardson Builders and Construction Managers, Ralph Fay with Ralph C. Fay AIA Architects, and Roy Ziegler, the past president and board member of the New Hope Historical Society. Gentlemen, welcome this evening. I want to thank you. We are excited to hear about the parts that you have played in New Hope, both in its rich history, its present, and what's happening to this with the town going off into the future. What we want to do is, I'd like each of you just to take a couple minutes and tell us what's your connection to New Hope. And then what we'll do is we'll get into questions, and since we're going alphabetically, Peter, you get to start us off. Tell us who you are, what you're doing here. You are welcome to. That doesn't mess up your filming, does it, Brad?
No, I haven't.
We can get. You can shoot hit the side of his head as you can mine. Right?
I think it'll be okay. I'm here a little bit.
Hi, folks. So I'm Peter Edwardson, local builder. Been doing it for about 30 years. My kids went to the Silbury School District, and I love New Hope. It's a feeling, it's an attitude, it's a place where people get along. It's the most wonderful, how do I say this? I never had a bad day in New Hope. Right? I work here, I play here. I don't work, I just work. So there's a real feeling in New Hope that's watching the changes that occur with construction. I admire Ralph. I've been working with Ralph for 30 years. My kids call him Uncle Ralph. It's a secret. So the revitalization of New Hope has grown in such a magical way because the preservation of the old has been acknowledged. And my detail, what I try to bring to a project with Ralph's guidance a lot of times is just the eye that makes it wonderful, that makes the detail jump off the architecture. The big thing that people don't realize is why they like something. Why do you like a certain car? Why do you like a certain house? Because it's the whole ball of wax. You're not looking at one little piece of it to say to yourself, oh, that makes me happy, that makes me happy. No, it's the big picture. New Hope's a real big picture, and the people in New Hope are loving. Even the ones that are left and right, it doesn't really matter. They all just kind of get along the same box, same sandbox. And that's kind of what I see. But I see New Hope, the changes are subtle. Sometimes you knock a house down, which I do, but we're rebuilding it for somebody who valued the property maybe perhaps more than the house that was existing there. But the value of New Hope is really just the people. And that's the most important thing I can share that makes this town different than Doylestown, than Newtown, than Princeton. It's a melting pot of all these different folks that just kind of get it. You know, it's not about being judgmental, it's about accepting. And that's the difference between, I think, certain areas of the country and New Hope. So that's kind of my, but I have some really cool, I have a really cool project that Ralph's designed
Oh, we're going to hear all that.
on North Main Street. It's just going to be wonderful for the community.
Right.
And in the center of town, we're doing a project called The Falls.
It's on the tour.
I know.
I know. It's foreshadowing for the
But Ralph really tried to capture New Hope. He tried to take the Perry Mansion from one side of the creek and jump it to the other. So when you're driving through town, it's a village feel. So that the stone that we're putting on the back of our project kind of marries up, so there's no disconnect. So the backs became the front, the fronts became the back. It became very expensive. But I think New Hope is really a one-of-a-kind location in all of America, let alone the world.
Great, well, thanks. And you guys, you're not obligated to come up here. Peter's
That's
just
just
going style.
No, I want to be a reference.
I don't mind that at all. Ralph, you want to take us through, tell us who you are, what you're doing, and
Well, hopefully you all know who I am by the projects that we do, but I'll give you a little bit before that. I am a product of Bucks County. My family moved here when I was in 3rd grade, all the way from Abington, Pennsylvania. So I'm a product of Central Bucks West, played football with Coach Patton, and always knew from age 7 that I wanted to be an architect. I was a little person, they'd say, what do you want to be when you grow up? I think I want to be an architect. Now, I don't know why I didn't say I wanted to be a builder. They got reputation. So New Hope, of course, my family lived in Doylestown. New Hope was my backyard. My music teacher was here, my theater teacher was here. I sat around the white piano at the Logan and sang show tunes. Probably had my first drink here. Maybe it was Lambertville. Probably not. And when it came time to start my own practice, after working in Philadelphia and Princeton, I said, I think I want to return to the environment that I was raised in. So 25 years ago, I opened a firm with 3 of us. Now there's 14 of us. And I will say along that path, New Hope has been very good to us and really given us an opportunity to continue to add to the texture of the town. And Connor is one of my very talented young people with me here, who's also an architect, and he'll be bringing up a few images so that we can kind of talk about the same thing and be able to place the new work with the old work. We're pretty fond of the befores and afters in the context.
Great, thank you very much. Roy, you want to tell us who you are, how you fit in with New Hope, and
Thanks. My introduction to New Hope was 1967. I was in kindergarten at the time. And I'd come over here because a friend of mine was stranded at Stella Dallas's across the river, and called for an emergency. He had to get his mother home because his car had broken down. So I came from Allentown to pick him up and stopped at Logan on the way back for a couple of drinks and then drove home. And then I got to know New Hope a little better after that with nightlife and so on. And then there's this great riverboat restaurant in the Holiday Inn, one of the great restaurants. I think it was one of the best restaurants in their chain at that time, which is a place we came to regularly. In 1990, I moved here, thanks to Chuck, got me involved in New Hope, and he talked about the Historical Society. So we joined the Historical Society the first couple of months after we moved here, and I've been a member. We've been members for 32 years, exactly 1/2 of the New Hope Historical Society's life, which tomorrow night is celebrating its 64th anniversary as a society. One of the best things I've ever done, frankly, getting involved with the New Hope community, and to see the kind of dedication that folks here have to this town. I mean, it's when you think about it, we were in the 1960s, and I know a lot of people who think New Hope's history began in 1960 with the hippies and so forth, but it does go back a little farther than that. And when I started hearing about the society and what their mission was, to preserve the historic nature of New Hope, not necessarily the building, but the historic things that happened here. There's been old and historic, like historic means something really important happened here. And yet there are some old buildings that went along with it, really important buildings. But the society's main goal when it started was to save some of the old buildings that have been really in danger. Mary Keller mentioned the Parry Mansion. This elegant 1787 Georgian-style mansion down the street was really very close to becoming a gas station, and you can imagine that. And on the other side of the street, the 1790 Parry Barn, which is now part of the Bucks County Playhouse, so they're leasing it from us. That was slated to be a diner. So they're going to tear down all these beautiful fieldstone, these two jewels in the crown of New Hope, tear them down and put a diner on one side of the street and a gas station on the other. Imagine what New Hope would look like today if you drove up Main Street and saw a gas station and instead of these two elegant Georgian-style buildings and an English barn on the other side of the street. So that was a heritage I bought into very quickly. and I could see that this was something that was needed in this community. So I gradually, after I retired, I volunteered to be a docent at the Perry Mansion. I wanted to learn more about it, learn more about what the mansion was, who the family was that built this place, and when they built it. Which I'll talk about a little later. And then as I got to complaining about a couple things, frankly, and I got to be on board. I was drawn into the board because of basically my letter of complaint to the president. That's the reason I didn't like it.
Works every time.
I learned that the hard way. And then after that, I was asked to be president. It was an honor, one of the honors of my life, to be president of the Historical Society for 2 terms. And during that time, we were celebrating, number one, the 250th birthday of Benjamin Perry, who built the house, and then we were celebrating the 50th anniversary the following year of the Historical Society. So I had 2 major roles to play immediately as I became president. And that's why I got to know the incredible volunteer spirit that we have in this town. I mean, even today, think about the number of volunteer committees that are in this town, making this town great. Anywhere from the Borough Council to the Revitalization Committee, to the Parks and Recreation Board, to the Zoning Board, to the Harb. And all these folks come out at nighttime after they're working all day and volunteer to be on these committees. That, to me, is what makes this town so great. This is a community spirit here, which is, I think, is really very envious of a lot of others. So I'm happy to be here tonight to say a few things about the history, and it's always my pleasure to work with Scott and his group. And thanks for coming.
Thank you, Roy. Thanks for this. And thank you, Roy, for doing an amazing job of answering like the first couple questions. All in that one introduction. Super job. All right. So what I want to do is I'm going to move Ralph. You and I we've had some planning meetings just a week ago with you and Connor, and you kicked it off in beautiful stuff. So let me frame the question. Okay. So when an architect is hired to conceive an idea for a new building or renovate an existing one that's in a historic location. So what elements go into the planning for that, and so that it fits into the character of the town?
Okay, don't remember that question, but
I just put it in question form. You said it, and I said that would be a really good answer. I should have just
all
read it.
right. I'll kick this panel discussion off with a context in my office, which is do no harm. And we take with great reverence being allowed to create architecture which will last long before I'm on this earth, and leave these ruins strewn across the landscape. And we only hope that people will care for the buildings that we've added to this environment as we care for the history of the buildings that are here now. In the goal of bringing an architect on, let's just hope that the architect cares about the community as much as the community does. So let's start with, it's really important that who you bring on to add to the tapestry, as you say, cares about the existing tapestry and does it in a tasteful way. There are people in this room that know what I'm talking about because Joe and his group do the same thing. And I walk down the streets of New Hope all the time, and certainly there's some positive reaction and some negative reaction to new construction. My job is to be as sensitive and caring about placing something new next to something existing, or maybe Connor can bring up the Logan, or using the idea of a new building to use the dollars that new building will generate to renovate the building that are going to be next to it. So what Connor has done, and what's on some of these things, and I'll relinquish, is on the lower left-hand corner is circa 1727. Other people turned it into the middle. And our goal with the dollars are going to be generated by building an addition next door is to remove all the bad stuff that's been done over 160 years. The wooden structure that was out front, the filling in of the colonnade with windows. So by adding a small addition to the right, we were then able to take the Logan and restore it to its literally back 1727 era, although that's a black and white photo. The next one is Canon Square. Canon Square has been in New Hope, and I think Roy has a lot of knowledge on the history of it. But about 25, years ago, there was discussion of making it better, and then 15 years ago, Roy was part of a group to make some photos, some renderings of what could improve Canon Square. And we eventually were asked, well, what would our thoughts be to improve Canon Square? Mine were a little more radical. Mine were to have the Logan Inn give up that road that you see in that little part here. That road belonged to the Logan Inn, and it did not serve any purpose. So Canon Square was a little mound that kids would run up to get to the top of. And we thought it should really be more of a gathering place. It should be a place that had some curving steps and some low benches, and how old you were, you should be able to get to it. So now there's a ramp. And it should have, when you take a picture of your child on the Canon, which people love to do, there should be the historic Logan Inn behind you. So we moved it. We took it, we turned it, and we generated a platform for Canon Square to continue to be a more public space. Public spaces are not very frequent in New Hope. There's a lot of private spaces. When we did the Ferry Market, there was literally no place with a roof over it that you could sit and eat and not have to pay to go into a restaurant. There was no outdoor park that wasn't one of the pocket parks where you could go to. So the Ferry Market, which is another project, which was formerly a place where they sold cars, was an attempt to give back to the community. You could just wander in and sit down, you don't even have to buy anything. So I'm gonna close with, some of our projects are newer and newish, and some of them are historic restorations, and some are private-public partnerships, like moving Canon Square, which doesn't happen without a strong agreement from the municipality. I also sit on the same board on the Historic Society and on Heritage Conservancy. So although once in a while we might do a new building, my belief is that we are here to be stewards of the landscape and the buildings that are here.
Thank you. Peter, so when you consider, you've been developing here in New Hope for a while, so when you consider what the projects that you've done, you have one that stands out as your most rewarding, and what would that one be? Tell us about it.
Well, Ralph was the architect, as usual. But 93 North Main Street, it's a white brick house up on Main Street, and that home happens. The client wanted a dream of living on Main Street in a white brick house, and Ralph created it. I built it. It was a combination of how to make it more special, simple details that make a house better. That's I think the magic of my life's career is the details. Ralph's architecture, maybe it's a collaboration of what he picks as a product, but it's really that's really that would be my favorite project. Right now, like I said, we're doing the falls. It's going to be a jewel, I believe, because we're using the best of the best materials that we can find, and the detail I think would be extraordinary.
You think that'll be a new favorite?
Probably.
It's already looks like it's coming together nicely. So we're looking forward to getting a chance to see it on Sunday.
Okay.
All right. Although I scribbled down, it said 93 North Main. That'd probably be a little bit of a walk from where we're going on our tour. Ralph, you know my
It's on the other side of the traffic light.
Sorry.
That private
So,
tour.
hold on. Come back for one of Roy's tours. The northbound tour might actually go by that.
It's on the Silver Coast.
Silver Coast, not gold.
I've never heard that before, so I have a lot to learn about New Hope. So we're going to shift back over to you, Roy, and one of your roles at the New Hope Historical Society is to plan and conduct tours of the town to kind of keep its history alive. So how do you choose which stories to tell, and what are your some of your favorite buildings on the New Hope tour? And I think you have some pictures to go along with this as well, too.
Two shots here.
I'll shut up and you got it away.
Well, yeah, thank you. The thing about New Hope is that why is it historic? And when a town this size, about roughly a mile square, has its almost the entire downtown and over 100 buildings on the National Register of Historic Places, it's a historic town. And my goal when folks come here for a tour on Sundays, Saturdays and Sundays, is to try to introduce them to some of this great history. And by doing that, I've selected certain buildings in town with the society's input, and we take folks around to see it. And what I'm showing is a progression of 300 years. This community really began 500 years before William Penn ever heard of Pennsylvania, what is now called Pennsylvania. And Lenni Lenape Native Americans were here, and the Aquatong Spring was a sacred place for them. And as that develops, the sacred place became a rather important deal in New Hope's development, because it gave birth to the Aquatong Creek, which runs through all of this part of Bucks County from roughly Buckingham into New Hope. And it started off, this town started off with one stranger coming to town and buying a swath of land, and then decided to tear down a whole bunch of trees and level the ground, and dared to put a high, tall building, a stone building, right on the edge of the water. And that may sound current news to you, but that was 1707. And the fellow's name was Robert Heath, who purchased the land from Penn. And he had one mill that attracted the farmers from all over the area, as far away as Plumsteadville, to bring their wheat to be processed in the mill and so on. And then to see that develop over the next century, where you had the town developing from a local mill town to one that produced just about everything you could imagine. Along that creek sprang up eventually 12 mills that produced anything from bricks. There was a couple brickyards at one time, one of which I believe supplied bricks for the construction of the Empire State Building. We had a wool mill, we had a flax mill, flax linen mill, we had a sawmill, we had a cotton mill, and further down we had a corn processing mill, a corn mill. And then farther down, Benjamin Parry came to town in the 1780s, and he bought the mill from the doctor that owned it, and it was a small flour mill where the Bucks County Playhouse is now located. And unfortunately, a couple of years after he bought it, it burned to the ground, as many mills did in those days. And he decided to expand it and enlarge it. The whole thing about this town is development. The whole history of New Hope is development. And I hear folks all the time say, New Hope's not the same as it was. And my answer is, it's never been the same. The beautiful thing about this part, I think Larry mentioned it earlier, was the town people came here to develop the town. They didn't come here to go to the playhouse. They came here to make a living and to prosper. And it's exactly what they did for 300 years. And to see when you go into the mill process, and then you come into the Revolutionary War and see how Washington encamped over a third of his troops that crossed the Delaware in Washington, was now Washington Crossing, were encamped here at New Hope, and one of the prime spots on top of the hill across from the library, where the major generals met here. I mean, Washington came here about a week or two before about 2 weeks before the crossing, and planned and enlightened the generals of what he was going to do with this crossing, and how the Battle of Trenton was going to work. It was all, a lot of it was the temporary, original parts were planned here in New Hope. So you see the Revolutionary War, it just takes over from there, and you see how this town, it's a prominent place in history. The Underground Railroad followed after that. And the old Wedgwood Inn on top of the hill, there was one of the places where the Underground Railroad stopped before they got the slaves onto the canal boats and got them up to New York and out of the country in many cases. Some stayed here, and made a living here eventually. And then you see the way that turns, even World War I, we're in the Edward Denson Hall right now. And Private Edward Denson was the first person in Pennsylvania killed in World War I. He was a New Hope native. And there was a monument to him, center picture. There's a monument to him right down the street at the Canon Square that Ralph mentioned. Another very important part of history. So I try to introduce all these topics to give them an idea. In 1 hour to cover 300 years of history is a challenge. Scott's going to do it in 2 hours.
It's actually an hour and 35 minutes. But so did you have some pictures that we have on the thing?
Yeah, we got one here. I just wanted to show you. This is the oldest picture I could find of the Logan, probably late 1800s. And this is what it looks like today. And Canon Square is magnificent because, that cannon, of course, was not used in the Revolutionary War, but that was the approximate spot of where Washington and Alexander decided to put the cannon to point it toward the ferry landing, the ferry slip, because it was a narrow part of the river, and they feared that the British would get over the river very quickly. So you had this cannon pointing at that first up, and up on top and across the library, another cannon pointed down at it, and one might have at a Borough Hall now pointed the other way. So you had 3 cannons aimed at the Surrey slip for the duration of the Revolutionary War. So the British never crossed here. The cannon that you see there is a Civil War cannon, and it was on loan to us. The Navy loaned it to us in 1903. If they forgot about it, so we still.
So it's still,
They didn't need it back. It's a Dahlgren cannon, and Dahlgren, John Dahlgren was a native of Warwick, Pennsylvania, just up the road, and he invented this cannon for use on land and on ships. It's actually used on USS Minnesota during the Civil War. And of course, the Civil War was another topic in New Hope that was not a very popular thing because this was a farming town, and they were relying on cotton and so forth, and so the Civil War was not a popular thing in New Hope. It was the mayor, in fact, Louis Coryell was the mayor at that time, didn't even talk about enlisting in the Civil War. But so the next one is the eldest, the Parry barn. We looked at 1958. This is the barn. There's an English-style barn, roughly 1790. Was going to be ripped down, and we're going to put a diner here on along the creek because the playhouse was becoming very popular at that time. So the society, one of the first purchases they made, in fact, the first purchase, was to purchase this barn and to rehabilitate it. You can see here what it looks like today. It is one of the main revenue sources for this historical society. It's now being leased to the Bucks County Playhouse on a long-term lease. They're making improvements inside and at their expense. So they also put that sidewalk in at their expense. And you can see the next one is the inside. This is what it looked like when we bought it. The horses had just left, by the way. They had to still be shoveled out a little bit. And
so that's the glory part of the job.
I wasn't on board that time, thank God.
Smart.
So this is what it looks like after we finished the renovations in here. It's just the way it looks today. And then the Parry Mansion was on the block.
Also on the tour. Also on the tour. We'll be
On your
back.
tour. On your tour.
Yes.
So this is 1967, somewhere in there, 65, 67. The way it looked when Margaret Parry Lang and her husband lived here. She was a 5th generation of Parrys who lived in this house. They lived here from the time before George Washington was president and until Lyndon Johnson was president. The family was in this house.
Wow.
So this is Margaret Parry Lang, and we bought the society bought it from her in '67 for a grand total of $68,000. And then we shut it down and spent about, thanks to the community support, spent $250,000 renovating it. And it was an eminent designer, interior designer, Charles Lamar, Rockefeller designer for their homes, who was in town at the Playhouse one day, and he asked one of our board members to see this whole house. And he walked through this house and he said, I can do something with this house. And his idea was there were 5 generations of the family who lived in this house. Let's portray a different generation in each part of the house, each room of the house. So when you walk through the Parry Mansion, you're walking through history. You're walking through from the Revolutionary, just post-Revolutionary period, all the way to 1900. So each room is decorated with period furniture and decor, the original stuff, that would have been in furnishing this home like this in that period of time for 5 generations. So that was, and just about 10 years ago, we had a paint study done of the actual paint on this house to go back to the original color of the paint. And this is as close as they can get. For years, it was painted bright white, which totally destroyed your vision of the beautiful blue field stone in this house. So that was redone a few years ago. Thanks again to the community support, we were able to do this. That's Ben Franklin there talking last summer. He came back just for us.
Yeah, okay. Before cameras were in. So we got time for one more before I kick it over to Ralph. Then.
Okay, just a point. The New Hope Ivyland Station was 1891 was built. It was a Frank Furness building. Frank Furness designed this building, and all the train stations along the route were Frank Furness designs. This was after they cut the train service in 1954. This was pushed back into the woods, way back behind Union Square right now, and it became a hangout for the guys who went hunting and fishing. Had a few beers maybe in that, and there was a lot of litter back there. But after the society was formed, we, with the help of the community, got a fundraiser together and in '64 brought it back out of the woods. You see it bringing it back out here, and restored it to its original grandeur. And the top of it had been broken off back in the woods, and went to Wycombe and got a mold for the Wycombe station and replicated it.
It's just like the one in Wycombe, same guy.
Yeah, so, okay.
Great, thank you for that. So, I would let him go all that. Peter, yes, what do you want to add?
The same bluestone that was on the Perry Mansion that you just mentioned, what we're incorporating into Ralph's project with the poles onto the exterior to capture a little history.
Which is funny, because until Ralph had mentioned that, I'd been by it a couple of times. My eye hadn't caught the echo of when designing the other, so it's pretty awesome. Ralph, we're coming back around to you. So you've provided architectural services on a number of New Hope projects. I'm curious, which one would you most want to see on one of Roy's future tours? Roy's, we're giving you grace, you got another 50 years, okay? So, what would you want to see? What would be one that you'd say, you know what, I would love to see this one, people still talking about this one 75, 80 years from now?
We'll start with, there's no project that I'm not proud of in this town.
Of course, okay.
And I need to give a lot of credit to our clients who have vision, who have dreams, who entrust those dreams to us. For some of our clients, it's the single largest purchase or amount of money that they will invest. And they're in New Hope because they also love New Hope. And they're asking us to guide how they're spending their dollars. And I wouldn't do any work if I didn't have fabulous clients. One of our fabulous clients was Kevin and Sherry Doherty, who had the vision to take the Playhouse, what had been closed. And you heard Mayor Keller say that the Playhouse was the engine for many years of the success of this town and the viability of it being a tourist destination. They then bought the old Zadar buildings. Who had been to Zadar's? Come on, I know more of you have. All right, fine. So in my youth, I may have spent a few nights in Zadar's. And Zadar's, before it was Zadar's, was actually the Playhouse Inn. So Robert Redford stayed at the Playhouse Inn. A number of luminaries of today, when they were just youngsters, stayed at the Playhouse Inn. It was there to give them a place to stay while they did summer stock at the Playhouse. Roy tells me it was empty, was it 28 years?
Right.
How long was it empty?
Oh, at least 12, 15 years.
So I remember it when there was a boxing ring in it. Roy remembers it when there was a liquor store and a post office in it. So when you look at that building and you look at our design, which we did in joint venture with another firm, architecture and interiors, I just want to point out that the first 9 feet of this project are in the floodplain. And I'm going to be quite honest, the first group of architects that took this project on didn't do anything on the first floor, and it was a dirt floor when I took over the project. For those of you who have walked into it, know that it is a viable, very large lobby. Yes, you can hose it down when the floods come, but the doors all open and the floods will come and they will recede and it will be there. Because we had the vision to give that space back to the community, and we worked with the municipality to say, I think we can do a little better than park cars or have a dirt floor. I'm very proud of this building. I'm very proud of the way it sits. I'm very proud of the fact that we put an addition on it that is a public space where you can enjoy the river, look back across one of our most historic buildings, the Playhouse. I'm proud of the fact that we have brought it back to its former use, which is an inn, and I suspect some people that are at the Playhouse, actors, are staying in what was formerly the Playhouse. I take a lot of pride in the fact that this was not an easy project. It was not an easy project because the parking lot is owned by 4 different people. It's not an easy project because the finances didn't really work initially on the square footage to the cost. It wasn't an easy project because it wasn't handicapped accessible. I could go on. It had to go through a number of hard reviews, which I will say that it is always my goal to take hard for their wisdom.
Could you tell us what that stands for?
I'm sorry, Historic Architectural Review Board.
Thank you.
And that is the board, and it was mentioned that we are an historic district. More buildings are part of the historic district than are not. There is an inventory of historic buildings that was done by the National Park Service. And when we do architecture within that area, all those of us in here know, that we have to subscribe to the principles that are set out by the Park Service. So one of the principles of the Park Service that I'm going to say that some of you will be aghast is Don't copy what was next door. Don't build a building that's 160 years old and build a new version of it. That's called Disneyland. We want a thriving environment that is expressive of what we do now. So hence the Ferry Market is an industrial building because it was a car dealership, but it is not trying to look like a cottage. So when I am at a hard board or I'm presenting to other people, it is important that I share the goals of most successful historic environments, and that is London, Paris, yes, the Louvre, with the pyramid in the middle of it, is in Paris. So is the Eiffel Tower. When the Eiffel Tower was built, people were aghast. It is now probably the biggest tourist attraction. So we use that to say that we can do current architecture sensibly done, sensitive to the scale of the community, sensitive to materials, but not necessarily copy buildings. And if you leave here with anything from me today, it's that we really don't want to create Disneyland in New Hope. Thank you for that opportunity.
Peter, we did a dry run on the tour a week and a half ago, and it was kismet. We ran into Peter right on the road in front of his falls project, unplanned, but it was great that we had a chance to chat with you. One of the things Peter shared with us about the falls project, and one of the things that's fascinating is that you see a sign that says coming soon, okay, and we're way beyond that on that one, but people are like, oh wow, they're doing that. They don't realize how much time went into that. Peter, how long did it take to get to where you're at right now?
Ralph knows best, but it's 10 years.
10 years to get where you're at
It
right
took
now.
10 years of approvals, 10 years of working out the financing, 10 years of getting working with the borough council and two or three different borough councils, because
Yeah, they change.
and different attitudes would show up and different visions would show up.
Yeah.
So it's been a real journey. I give Ralph credit for his dedication to the project also, because it was a labor of love for many years, and now it's becoming a reality. And I hope it's going to be very tasteful in the appearance when you walk through town. That you'll look at the Perry Mansion and you won't realize that you're looking at something new. We can pull that off, I've achieved a really good goal.
Well, we have to make sure we point that out when we're walking by.
We hope to get it in Architectural Digest.
That would be awesome. So since you've been doing this for a long time, what would your advice be to a new developer who's coming in, or a builder? What would you say to them? Besides, don't run away.
My son's just joining me and learning the business right now, and I said to just think outside the box. Don't put yourself in a box, and don't do the same thing that your dad might have did. But I think it's just being to adapt, to be smart enough to realize that you're not going to get your way all the time.
So what was some of the inspiration for the Falls project? Tell us a little bit. That was another thing you shared with us. So we actually felt compelled to go see the Falls. So tell us a bit about that.
The Falls was it was driven by a lot of different opinions with the Harbor Committee and the Borough Council Committee. But the Perry Mansion was the driving force for these houses here. Okay, as far as the appearance that bridge on Main Street, you'd see this beautiful facade that the Perry Mansion jumped across the creek. We had visions of making it into mill buildings at one time, which a lot more glass, but the powers that be decided to direct the architecture to be a little more traditional. They captured some new audience with the rooftop decks, which are here, and here. They create a little bit of something different in New Hope. So they embraced today's world. But I think the big thing that drove it was the differences in material, right, Ralph? The stone, the brick, the different color stone, the siding. The siding looks, I think, will be pretty extraordinary when it's all put together, which they're starting to get to that point. The chimneys, the landscape. I just think it's an appropriate building in that location as to what it could have been.
Added at some point when it turned into a home, but before that it was probably a front porch. It has that kind of front porch look to it. So our goal is to roll back time and put the front porch back, but with a little flair of, maybe not exactly the way it was done, a little bit of today. So yes, it's painted a monolithic color as opposed to calling out the trim, and the windows in the front are probably a little larger than
What's
they
the
might
address on
have.
that, Ralph? Where- oh,
Main Street. It's right near Peter's White House. It was,
Okay, all right.
it's on the next tour.
We're coming back next year, and Roy's doing all of it.
We're on the Gold Coast.
So I really just want to say that not every building is perfect in New Hope just the way it is. A lot of them have been violated over time by putting bay windows and odd shutters. So sometimes it is okay to roll it back and bring it back, but let's keep it rolled back with
You
a.
did start with do no harm. First,
no
do
harm.
no harm.
Sometimes you
Sometimes
gotta-
it's, yes,
you
do
gotta
some
fix the
repair,
road.
fix it. That's right. What I wanted to do is I wanted to ask each of you, as we get to the end of this, is that what is your, sounds corny, what is your hope for New Hope going forward? I mean, what do you see what's going to happen? So in your part of the world, what do you see that's going to happen? We'll start with you, Ryan.
Well, I go back to Dr. Arthur Ricker, who was a very popular, prominent physician who had his office in New Hope, right across from the Logan Inn. And he founded the society, Historical Society, in 1958. Their first board meetings were held at the Logan Inn, which is a great spot for meetings, and way back in the 1950s. And he was, after they had purchased the mansion and had redone it, it was completed, Dr. Ricker was standing on the front lawn of the Perry Mansion with his vice president, Joe Makita. And I have to read you this quote because this is my hope for New Hope. He was standing in front of this lawn after one of their fundraisers, and he's talking to Joe Makita. This is Joe's account. And Dr. Ricker said, "Look about you, Joe. In all directions, you see physical structures inherited from past generations. But there is more to this inheritance than stone, brick, and frame buildings. There is an undefinable something that embraces one's mind and spirit with a feeling of graciousness, reverence, humility, and pride in what we call our historical heritage. It is this inheritance that we want to conserve and pass on to future generations." And Joe Makita said, this is how Dr. Ricker felt. And that is what drove him with a single-minded determination to create New Hope Historical Society. So my hope is that Dr. Ricker's legacy will continue. From the past 3 centuries of New Hope will continue to the centuries ahead of us, and that the historical heritage, the importance of what happened in this town over these 3 centuries and how it evolved will stay with us. And to stay with the future generations that will live here and occupy these places where we are now. And that's the mission of the New Hope Historical Society. And I'm happy to say that I think we're in pretty good shape, because a good omen is that tomorrow night we're having our 64th annual meeting at River House at Odette's, and it is sold out with 225 members of our and guests of our society. Will be attending this fundraiser and dinner tomorrow night. We'll be honoring one of our great board members for over 30 years, Herb Sandor, who passed away recently. And we'll also be honoring Alex Fraser, who was the producer of the Bucks County Playhouse that evening. So it's good to see this, and not that I mentioned earlier that not just the Historical Society, but all these volunteers who join these groups who make this town work are just to be commended. And that's the spirit that Dr. Ricker had. And that's the spirit that we want to continue. And to answer your question, how New Hope got its name, Ralph, it would start off as Wells Ferry. John Wells came to town and built the first ferry in Logan Inn. He was succeeded by Benjamin Canby, who was, at the time was then called Canby's Ferry. And after that, Coryell moved across the river with the help of his father, and he was called Coryell's Ferry. He bought the ferry, he ran the ferry. He went bankrupt, and John Beaumont bought it, and it was Beaumont's Ferry. Was the name of the town, was the name of the inn, Beaumont Town. And after that, Benjamin Parry came along, and Parry was rather a modest Quaker who didn't want the town named after him. But he unwittingly gave the town its name when his mill, the flour mill where Bucks County Playhouse now stands, just shortly after we bought it, burned to the ground. The mill was called the Hope Mill. And Parry, within 1 year, rebuilt the mill, and he named it the New Hope Mill. And the name stuck with all the farmers and folks who came around here to take their products to the mill. We're going up to the New Hope Mill. And sooner or later, a long time later, in 1837, the town was incorporated as New Hope. And Benjamin Parry's nephew became the first mayor or Burgess of New Hope. He lived to see that, and his mill stood. He died in 1839. His mill stood and produced flour over about 100 years later, until 1939 when the Playhouse party. So that's
Great.
Sounds good.
That's awesome.
Thank you very much. Now, yes, thank you. So if you're on tour and that comes up, pretend my version is as eloquent as Peter, in a few words, what is your hope for this borough going forward?
I think the best thing I can say is with the New Hope, it's embracing the past, accepting the present, and looking to the future as that it's not all going to change. There'll be bits and pieces that change, but New Hope, like I said at the beginning, is really an attitude of people. It's a love fest. It's an energy that can't be duplicated. I don't know where in the world. So that's mine.
That's cool. Ralph, same question.
Well, I have many thoughts, but I'm just going to stick with Roy. Roy has given you some of the luminaries of New Hope from Benjamin Parry. And, you know, I guess I hope 100 years from now, the next Roy, the historian, speaks as favorably on the buildings that I've added to this landscape, and that we will be considered as people that have contributed.
That's awesome. Thank you. Want to give these guys a round of applause? I'd like to open it up for questions. We only have time for a couple of brief questions. So I'll tell you what, if you have a burning question, then these fellows will probably be here for a few minutes afterwards. You can ask them in person and get a one-on-one encounter with one of our speakers. So what I want to do then is I want to wrap things up. I want to thank you all for attending the Central Bucks Chamber's Excellence in Design Seminar 2022. I want to thank our committee members. If you're on the committee, raise your hand, please. Thank you all. I appreciate all of your efforts this year. We're really looking forward to an exciting tour. If you didn't know already, we're having a tour on Sunday. If you come on the tour, the $30 price is reduced to just $25. This is the original Odex, which I understand is just getting a nice new facelift. Teresa was telling us about that. So I want to wrap things up by thanking all of our sponsors again: Harleysville Bank, Phillips & Donovan Architects, AB8 Waste, J.G. Petrucci and Rosalind for the wine, Mandy Baker for the amazing tile, also Cindy and Roy at the Historic Society. When we chose to, I'm saving the best for last, right? So when we chose to come to New Hope, okay, I was some trepidation. They've got tours already. You can go on any one of a number of tours. And I thought, why would they welcome us? And they did, which was awesome, and I really appreciate that. I especially want to thank Carroll Engineering for their 12th year, I think was it, Tom? 12th year? You have to go talk to accounting and see how long they've been running. So thank you very much. Also, especially the New Hope Eagle Fire Company. They're responsible for your parking today, the American Legion for our seats and where we're at today, Wegmans for the food. I especially want to thank Amy for our photos tonight. So be sure to get your tickets. If you're here and you don't have a ticket for Sunday, I believe Mary Lou has your tickets. You'll be ready to go. We'll be here at 12 o'clock. Be prompt. The bus will leave without you. If you're not here, we want every single person to be here. Our guided tour is going to start at the firehouse. We're going to have the River House at Odette's is going to be providing us round-trip transportation. So your actual walk is about a mile, but you're actually going to be traveling more like 3. Okay, so you can tell your friends and family, we're on a 3-mile walking tour. They don't need to know that 2/3 of it was in a van, all right? So I want to thank her. Be sure to catch a couple of events that are coming up. The Central Bucks Chamber has so many great cultural events. The Film Festival, which I know is one of Brad's big things, that he's been working on hard all year long. It's coming up October 15th and 16th. Am I still hired for something or other? I'm
Yeah.
looking forward- Yeah, awesome. So looking forward to that.
Scott reads at our table read for our scripts that are submitted.
That was so much fun last year. I'm looking for that this year. And we'll be back in New Hope on the 27th of October at the New Hope Winery for the NET event. So I want to thank you all for coming out this evening, and appreciate you coming out. I'm looking forward to seeing you all on the tour. Thank you.